Yo, welcome to my channel, Ward Draws a Lot. Obviously I'm Ward, or I wouldn't have named it Ward Draws a Lot. This week we're gonna go through my 8th grade sketchbooks. So for the first sketchbook I have on the first page is my OC Nikki, who looks like this now. That drawing was done around 12 years ago, which was back in 2009, which is why he looks so different than he does now. A lot of these sketchbooks have just fan art in them. Oh, that's proof of the date, back in 2009 that I drew them. Now, I had been drawing basically my whole life up until this point, but I didn't start taking it seriously, quote-unquote seriously, until around like 7th or 8th grade. And even then, I have some sketchbooks before these for the 7th grade, but at that point, there wasn't really much in those books, and it was just a few doodles here and there, so I don't really count those. But I did invent my OC's Nikki and his twin brother Rose in those original books by then. So here's the logo Ward Draws from 12 years ago that I had no idea was going to end up, making YouTube videos 12 years later. So that's kind of funny. There's a lot of scene and emo influences in these drawings because I really liked the style. Some goth influences somewhere in there too, I think. I just remember me being way younger and I really wanted to dress in those clothes and that type of style, but I know my mom would never let me. So I ended up just drawing characters who would dress in that style instead. We also have, like I said before, a lot of fan art, so at that time Naruto was a huge thing for me, and so was Assassin's Creed 2. That game was basically my universe at that time because I played a lot of it, and my little brother played a lot of it, and we would basically share the game, and yeah, so that's why there was some fan art of that. And you also have just anything that I could get my hands on that I could draw to, like inanimate objects like shoes, or like sometimes I would draw a painting that was already up on the wall in the house. You also have some vent art somewhere along the lines, and at this point the vent art was still pretty, not so much innocent, but much less violent than it was in the future, which if I ever do show those other sketchbooks from like high school where I would do a lot more vent art, I probably won't show the vent art because some of it isn't very, it's not very pleasing to look at because it's very painful art. That's like the best way I could probably put it, honestly. I even have like some fashion outfit design things that are lying around here because I low-key wanted to do fashion. This is like an optical illusion of my name right here, so in the background would be swirls going one way and my name going the other way. This is just more emo art. Oh man, sometimes it's painful to look at the art you did when you were like 10 or 12 or around that age, especially like this right here. Like, what is this? Like, why did I think that was so cool? Like, so some of these I'm like, what was I doing? Who let me have a sketchbook? The top of this page was actually drawn by my friend who I let draw in my book because she was a fantastic artist, and she still is till today. And the bottom half is just me along with that random eye in the middle of the page. Oh, I forgot to say, I was horrible with how I would space out the page. So like some of the page would just be completely empty and I would just have one small doodle in the middle or on the side. I didn't know how to properly use a sketchbook, which you can honestly use it any way you want, but like in my head I'm like, yo, I wasted so much space on this paper, I could have done so much more with it. Then we have more emo art that I honestly have no idea what it meant back then, and it's just I hate it. I hate it. More of Nikki. He was all over this book. Whenever you saw the striped sweater character, that was him. This is probably one of the best drawings in the book. It's Lightning from Final Fantasy 13. I drew her off of this Game Informer issue that we had at the time, and I was so proud of it. I was like, no way, I can't believe I did this. Some of these drawings were little characters from Little Big Planet that like we would get to decorate, so I drew mine and like some online friends as characters as well. I also played a lot of Kingdom Hearts at this time, so that's why a lot of this stuff will have very Kingdom Heartsy references to them, or characters, or like anything in a long black coat to represent Organization 13. All that truly wonderful stuff. Okay, so as for my drawing skill during this first sketchbook, I don't feel like I really had any. I stayed in the same place because I wasn't drawing to improve. I was drawing to just feel nice, like that I had an escape to go draw to, which I know is like extremely cliche, but that's what the drawing book was for me, and it always was that until later on when I grew up and I could handle emotions a little bit better and stuff like that. But for the most part, my sketchbook was a place where I could go to and draw in that like things I like and things that I could imagine and have a good time doing it. So even though a lot of the time I would be like, oh, this looked ugly, I still had fun doing it and I didn't care. You see how this guy has no eyes and the one before that didn't have eyes? Sometimes I wouldn't draw the thing that I was intimidated by because I didn't want to go through the hardship of that, so I would just leave it blank. So some characters would have no arms or eyes or whatever I thought was like gonna just make me not feel good about myself, so I was like, no. And that's the end of the first sketchbook. The second sketchbook was pretty small, didn't really have much to it. It was only like maybe 10-12 pages, and again, I wasn't drawing to get any better, so I just drew whatever came to mind, or fan art, like of Fruits Basket. A lot was in this book. I was really heavy on Fruits Basket at this time, so a lot of my character influences came from that, especially from like the original manga, and that was like one of the first mangas that I started collecting, so very heavy influences in my art came from there. Some of these drawings are actually surprisingly pretty alright, and some of them are pretty ass, I'm not gonna lie. Some of them, they just don't look good, but I always remember just telling myself, just try something different, because I didn't want to be too scared of everything forever. So eventually I got brave enough and started drawing whatever I wanted to, which is when this third sketchbook comes in. So this is where I start drawing eyes, even though I'm doing bad at them, or like I'm not drawing them well. That's when I'm like, okay, we could still do it, because my mom would push me and say, you know, I know you could draw eyes or whatever, like hands that's troubling you, you just have to do it. So I took her words to heart, and that's exactly what I did. I started taking characters that would be difficult to do, and I started drawing them as best as I could, because I knew that since at least someone saw the potential in me to get better, I knew that maybe I can get better. So that's when I started to also read a lot more detailed works like D. Gray Man or Bleach, and then I would also try and go after their styles and try and recreate how they would do their artwork so I could learn how to do artwork. I also still tried to do my own characters, but whenever I drew my own characters, I realized that I was not so much good enough, but I didn't have enough skill to create my own character the same way a manga artist who practiced maybe 20 plus years doing that. So I knew there was a huge difference and a gap I had to fill, but I had to keep practicing. So slowly and surely enough, the bodies I would draw started to form a little bit better, along with the characters that I would do would kind of become a little bit more complex. Sometimes I would end up beating myself up a lot more than I should, because I was like, I can't do it. It's hard. Drawing at first is really hard, and drawing even down the line is hard, because it's almost like you can never stop learning a new skill. Let's say you have finished practicing bodies. Okay, now you gotta do backgrounds. Okay, now you've done backgrounds. Now you gotta practice perspective, and then so forth and so on. There's just so many things that you can learn in this field that it's like intimidating at first, which is why a lot of younger artists, they don't want to continue drawing because it's hard, but then there are people who really want to learn it and persist with it, and they stay with it for a very long time, and it means a lot to them, like it kind of did to me. Okay, so since I started reading more complex pieces and drawing those more complex characters, I eventually got the idea of how to kind of put together a character that looks nice, and I started to try and do that, and I could tell the difference looking at these sketchbooks that younger Ward was practicing, and she was getting better, but she still had a long way to go. And that made sense because I didn't have a lot of resources to kind of look up guides on how to draw. I just kind of taught myself more than anything. There wasn't really much YouTube videos. The books were really horrible at describing how to draw, and it was a difficult journey to try and even get to somewhere when it came to drawing at this young of an age with very little knowledge around you. I mean, I had like some older brothers who drew, but that's it. And they didn't even really continue drawing. They just kind of drew when they were younger, or stopped after a while, or did realism and not animation and cartoons, unless it was just for fun or for a joke. So I kind of didn't really have anyone else around me to help with that. I had some friends though who also read manga and watched anime, and they would critique my artwork and tell me like, oh, maybe this could be better and stuff like that. So eventually I kind of got to get a hold of what I was trying to do. And by the end of this third sketchbook in 8th grade, that's when I was like, okay, I think I'm getting somewhere. And maybe by the time I hit high school, I can get somewhere even farther. Okay, so at this point, all I basically have is a few pages left because this is near graduation, and I didn't have the time to get a new sketchbook, so I just kind of drew on the pages, and at this point I was watching and reading a lot of Soul Eater, so my brain was like adjusting to that style even though I didn't mean to, and I was still into D. Grayman a lot, but by the time I started drawing in this little notebook, I could tell my style and my personality and just my overall art experience had grown a lot, and I could tell this is probably the biggest difference between all three books. So everything I did from there led up to the point of drawing this way, and it just looked so much better. And this was basically the last drawing of the book, which is the one I did the first like week in my high school, where it was like a pre-week for testing, and by then I had, I think, grown a lot. So what I got from that, basically from my young self to my older self, is just keep drawing and practicing, and eventually I'll get better. And I think I definitely have grown since even just a few years ago, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. So yeah, thanks for watching, and remember, I love you. Bye.